Hey guys, today we'll be covering a 2015 romance miniseries called Noble My Love. In the opening scene, we are introduced to the main character Lee Kong-hoon, who is the CEO of DOL Group. His photographs have been published in magazines since he was a child, making him famous. He appears to be an ideal man with whom anyone would fall in love with. Elsewhere, we see a young veterinarian doctor named Cha Yoon-seo, who is cycling down the street when she notices an ad for loans. She replaces the advertisement with one from her clinic and smiles. She then proceeds to a stable where she has to administer injections to domestic animals. However, she finds it difficult to deal with them, causing a mess. Later, while Yoon-seo is at her clinic, she receives a call from her friend Jin Kyung, who invites her to their college reunion. Meanwhile, a disciplined Kong-hoon gets up on time, gets ready, and drives to his office. Upon reaching there, he notices the secretary with a dog. He asks what the dog is doing there, to which the secretary responds that the dog is their campaign model for their new project. Kong-hoon doesn't appear to particularly like animals, so he delegates the task to his secretary. Next, we return to Yoon-seo as she attends the college reunion party. She meets up with Jin Kyung, who encourages her to socialize with other people to promote her clinic. She also gossips about their former male classmates and tells her to pick one for a date. However, Yoon-seo is uninterested in any of them. During the conversation, they are approached by another classmate named Moon Yura, who belittles Yoon-seo for her boring lifestyle. Yoon-seo simply dismisses her and departs after packing food for her pet cat. In the office, Kong-hoo's employees are prepping for the ad, but the dog runs away. Seeing this, Kong-hoo tells the secretary to get the dog back as soon as possible. As he walks out, he notices the dog on the stairs and begins chasing after it. Meanwhile, Yoon-seo is returning home, sad and depressed. On her way, she notices a store and stops for a drink. Outside the store, she notices the same model dog. She believes the dog is thirsty, so she gives it some water. Just then, Kong-hoon arrives and begins pulling on the dog's leash. Yoon-seo tries to stop him, but Kong-hoon claims ownership of the dog. He also tells her about the loss he is bearing due to the dog. He continues to pull on the dog's leash, making Yoon-seo furious. She yells at him for being heartless and claims that the dog's temperature is higher than that of humans, putting stress on the dog's health. Shortly after, Kong-soon's secretary arrives and takes the dog. However, the poor dog is still unwell during the shoot, so Kong-hoon instructs his secretary to put ice packs on the dog, making it more comfortable. In the next scene, Yoon-seo returns home and is irritated to find her pet cat's hair all over the place. After yelling at it for a while, she gives it the food she has packed from the party. She then talks to her cat and shares about her day. Later, she calculates her income and learns that it's not enough to pay off her student loan. Despite this, she makes up her mind to pay off all of her debts, no matter what. In the next scene, Kong-hoon is in a parking lot when a gang forces him to inhale a drug and abducts him. While later he regains consciousness and finds himself bound in a chair. He acts unconscious while cleverly untying his hands. Soon after, a member of the gang approaches him and Kong-hoon attacks him. Eventually, he is able to overpower all of the gang members except one, who stabs him in the stomach. Injured, Kong-hoon somehow manages to flee the place. In the meantime, Yoon-seo is returning home from the grocery store in the rain. She is afraid of the thunderstorm, so she sings loudly to distract herself. On the way, she comes across Kong-hoon, who is lying down. As she approaches him, she notices his wound and decides to call an ambulance. However, Kong-hoon stops her from doing so and falls unconscious on her shoulder. Scared, Yoon-seo manages to carry him to her clinic and attempts to wake him up. When Kong-hoon slowly opens his eyes, she informs him that she's a vet and doesn't have a license to treat people, but for now, she will treat his wound. She then unbuttons his shirt to examine his wound, but instead gets distracted by his body. However, she quickly snaps out of it and concentrates on the wound. Yoon-seo learns that the wound isn't very deep, so she stitches it and applies bandages. After this, she appears to be tired, so she falls asleep beside him. The next morning, Kong-hoon awakens to find Yoon-seo sleeping beside him. He recalls the previous night and the way Yoon-seo treated him. He gets up, puts on Yoon-seo's shirt, and calls his secretary to pick him up. Before departing, he leaves his card with his name and phone number on the table. Unfortunately, Yoon-seo's cat drops the card into the dustbin. A little while later, Yoon-seo wakes up and discovers that Kong-hoon has already left. She is disappointed that he didn't even thank her for saving his life. On the way back home, Kong-hoon receives a call from his mother, who is concerned about him. But hearing his voice, she is relieved to learn that her son is fine. Before hanging up, she advises him to get married. Upon arriving home, Kong-hoon's family doctor examines his wound and says that whoever treated the wound did it well. This reminds him of Yoon-seo, and he wonders why she hasn't called him yet. A few days later, Kong-hoon's secretary gives him Yoon-seo's information. She took 8 years to complete her studies because she had to work several part-time jobs and take a few years off due to her financial situation. He also reveals that she has a large loan debt for starting her veterinary practice. He then suggests Kong-hoon repay her debts in exchange for saving his life. However, Kong-hoon refuses to do so and decides to wait for her call. The days pass by, but he hears nothing from Yoon-seo. Later, a desperate Kong-hoon drives to Yoon-seo's clinic, and before getting out of the car, he notices his secretary in the back seat. He asks why he is with them, to which the secretary responds that he has been instructed not to leave Kong-hoon alone. Following this, Kong-hoon notices that one of the customers is upset with Yoon-seo for not grooming her dog. As the customer leaves, Yoon-seo sticks a no grooming notice outside her clinic and smiles. Seeing this, he also has a smile on his face and secretly takes her picture. The following day, Kong-hoon returns to the clinic alone, but finds it closed. He wonders where she is, and as he walks away, he notices her on her bicycle. He quickly calls her name, causing her to come to a halt and turn around. Yoon-seo recognizes him right away and asks him about his wound. She then takes him to her clinic, and as soon as they enter, Kong-hoon asks her to move her cat because he can't stand its hair flying around. Hearing this, she tells him that he can leave if he wants, but he chooses to stay. After this, Kong-hoon mentions that he is there to pay for his surgery. But when Yoon-seo hands him over the bill, Kong-hoon is surprised because she has quoted a much lower amount than he had anticipated. He asks her to reconsider, but Yoon-seo appears perplexed. During the conversation, the cat approaches them, making Kong-hoon uncomfortable. He asks her to move the cat once more, and when Yoon-seo gets up, she accidentally slips and falls on him. This creates an embarrassing moment for both of them, so she asks him to leave. In the next scene, Kong-hoon asks his secretary if their city building is still vacant, which the latter confirms. Later, Kong-hoon takes Yoon-seo to the empty building and tells her to move her clinic there. He reveals that he's offering her the building in exchange for saving his life. To his surprise, she declines the offer because she prefers to earn it through her own hard work. This bruises his ego, and he starts devising a plan to make her accept the offer. The next day, Yoon-seo is approached by her building's owner, who reveals that they have sold the building, and the new owner has decided to demolish the place. Taken aback, Yoon-seo claims that her lease is still valid, but the owner simply walks away. A few moments later, she receives a call from the new owner, who is none other than Kong-hoon. He tells her to surrender herself and accept the offer. However, a stubborn Yoon-seo refuses to surrender and instead decides to look for a new place. She visits several brokers in her search for a new location, but is unable to find an affordable option. She also visits several banks for a loan, but none of them approve her for one. 7 days pass, and a group of people enter her clinic to demolish it. Left with no options, she heads to Kong-hoon's office and storms inside his office, furious. She then begins hitting him with her bag and soon begins crying, asking how he could do this to someone who saved his life. Kong-hoon offers for her to work with him, but she warns him not to play games. She also threatens to go to the press, but Kong-hoon appears unfazed. Enraged, Yoon-seo steps on his foot, but Kong-hoon pulls his foot away, causing her to slip. Just then, he grabs her and tells her to surrender. However, she is still not ready to give up. Instead, she gives him her bank details and tells him to send her security deposit. Just then, Yoon-seo receives a call from Jin Kyung, summoning her to a dance studio. Upon arriving there, she meets a college friend, and the three of them catch up. The male friend compliments Yoon-seo, saying she looks the same as before. Later, when their male friend departs, Jin Kyung lends Yoon-seo some money because she is in need. Shortly after, they are approached by Moon-ra, who begins bullying Yoon-seo once again. She makes fun of her rural veterinarian practice and her poor lifestyle. Yoon-seo has had enough of it and speaks up, telling her that she will be moving to a city soon. The sudden outburst startles Moon-ra, making Yoon-seo happy. However, as soon as she returns home, she regrets what she said. Left with no other option, Yoon-seo approaches Kong-hoon and accepts his offer, but she makes it clear that she will be taking his money as a loan. She explains that she will deduct the treatment costs from the loan and repay the remainder with interest. Kong-hoon accepts the deal by shaking her hand. Later that night, she returns to her old clinic, reminiscing about the good old days. She then bids farewell to the place and gathers courage for a new beginning. A few days later, she successfully opens her new clinic in the city. She snaps a selfie with her cat and clips it on the board. One evening, Kong-hoon pays a visit to Yoon-seo's new clinic and finds her asleep with the door open. He then sits beside her and continues to stare at her. A few moments later, she opens her eyes and finds Kong-hoon in front of her. She thinks it's her dream, so she pinches his cheek and begins to play with his face. But when she finds that he is real, she gets up and screams in embarrassment. Kong-hoon then asks her whether she sleeps in her clinic, to which she responds that she must do so until she finds a new apartment. He then asks her about the $100 million he gave her, and she responds that she needs it to advertise for her new clinic and has many other expenses. Hearing her out, Kong-hoon asks why she refused to take more money from him, to which she responds that she prefers to have as much money as she can handle. Then, he offers to let her stay at his house, but she immediately declines. The next day, Kong-hoon is talking to himself in his office when he is interrupted by his secretary. He shows him some pictures of some businesswomen selected by Kong-hoon's mother as marriage material and asks him to pick one. However, Kong-hoon appears uninterested in all of this. Later, he sends his secretary to Yoon-seo's clinic with a large bouquet of flowers, instructing him to invite her to lunch. However, Yoon-seo has the secretary clean the clinic instead, and the two eat lunch there. After waiting for a while in a restaurant, Kong-hoon heads to the clinic and finds his secretary having lunch with Yoon-seo. When he becomes angry, the secretary rushes out. Kong-hoon then joins Yoon-seo at the table. She shares the food with him, but he initially refuses to eat it. However, his hunger eventually forces him to give in and eat, and to his surprise, the food is quite tasty. While they are eating, Yoon-seo's male friend arrives and finds her with Kong-hoon. He asks about the man, to which Yoon-seo replies that he's her business partner who funded her new clinic. Meanwhile, Moon-yu-ra is walking across the street when she discovers Yoon-seo's new clinic. She then calls her friend and plans to congratulate Yoon-seo properly. The same night, Yoon-seo looks at the flower bouquet and decides to text a thank you message to Kong-hoon, but she quickly changes her mind. The next day, Yoon-seo goes to an expensive restaurant where Moon-yu-ru and her other friends await her. Moon-yu-ru claims that Yoon-seo must be successful to open the clinic in such a premier location and asks her for a treat. In order to brag, Yoon-seo decides to treat her friends, but she is shocked to learn that it's a very expensive restaurant. Soon, the waiter arrives and hands them a bottle of wine, mentioning that it is a gift from the man at the next table. When Yoon-seo looks over, she notices Kong-hoon sitting nearby. She wonders why he's there. Kong-hoon then places an order for Yoon-seo's table. Somehow the entire time, Moon-yu-ra believes that Kong-hoon's actions are due to his attraction to her. Following this, Yoon-seo pretends to use the restroom and beckons Kong-hoon over for a conversation. While on his way, he overhears Yoon-seo's friends making fun of her. He then meets Yoon-seo, who questions him about why he ordered the wine and food. Kong-hoon responds that it was a surprise gift for his business partner because he thought that girls like surprises. Yoon-seo claims that she isn't like other girls and walks away. After lunch, she is concerned about the bill, but to her surprise, Kong-hoon has already cleared it. Yoon-seo then exits the restaurant, where she sees her friends as well as Kong-hoon waiting for her outside. To everyone's surprise, he offers her a ride back home in his luxurious car. On the way back, Kong-hoon advises her not to see her mean friends again. Furthermore, he invites her to accompany him on a date, and the two of them sit in a park. Kong-hoon shows her photographs of several businesswomen and tells her that he must choose one as his life partner. However, he doesn't want to marry, which is why he requires her help. He asks her to enter into a contractual relationship with him. When Yoon-seo doesn't understand, he reveals that he doesn't want a serious relationship. A disgusted Yoon-seo begins to walk away, but Kong-hoon pursues her and proposes that they be in the relationship. She angrily declines, claiming that she doesn't want a con artist as her first boyfriend. When he gets closer, she gets nervous and punches him in the face before departing. Later at home, Yoon-seo decides to become more confident around men, so she decides to join a dance studio where she'll practice dancing with boys. Following this, she goes to the same dance studio where Jin Ki-young has enrolled and practices dancing with her male friend. Surprisingly, Yoon-seo's heartbeat is normal despite the fact that she is with a man. She wonders what happens to her while she's with Kong-hoon. Just then, she receives a call from Kong-hoon, which causes her heart to race once more. When she answers the phone, he asks her about his proposal, but she nervously hangs up, claiming that she is busy. In the dance studio, she makes two new friends named Non-chae and Bae-ra. While talking with them, she receives another call from Kong-hoon, which she rejects, making him angry. The next day, Kong-hoon goes to Yoon-seo's clinic and asks for some time to talk to her. He then brings up their contractual relationship and shares his decision to limit the duration of the relationship to only 3 months. Initially, Yoon-seo objects, but Kong-hoon makes an offer that if she agrees, she won't have to pay her loan or rent for the clinic. However, Yoon-seo sadly informs him that she will be closing the clinic soon. Kong-hoon advises her not to give up and provides her with a teddy bear costume, making her wear it and advertise her clinic. After a full day of advertising, Yoon-seo returns to the clinic tired, and a few moments later, her male friend arrives with his sick dog. Upon examining the dog, she tells him to leave the dog with her for the night. As her friend walks out, Kong-hoon enters the clinic and approaches Yoon-seo. He comforts her, saying that he invested in her because she's a good vet. This makes Yoon-seo happy, and she finally decides to give the relationship contract a try. The next day, Kong-hoon's secretary arrives at the clinic with the contract papers. According to the contract, Kong-hoon is the dominant one in the relationship, while Yoon-seo is responsible for making the relationship appear genuine. The contract also states that the two of them must meet every day, and that Yoon-seo is not allowed to see other men for 3 months. Furthermore, the secretary specifies that anyone who violates the contract will be fined $100 million and will lose the clinic building. At long last, they sign the contract and shake hands. The first day of their relationship contract begins with their normal routines. Before Kong-hoon leaves for home, he asks one of his employees if she has a boyfriend. When she confirms, he asks about the couple's usual activities. She responds that they eat together and watch movies. Elsewhere, Yoon's CEO closes her clinic to meet Kong-hoon, but Jin Ki-young arrives to pick her up for the dance class. Shortly after, Kong-hoon arrives and the three of them proceed to the dance studio. Upon arrival, Jin Ki-young introduces Kong-hoon as Yoon Seo's new boyfriend in front of her male friend. The male friend introduces himself as Song-hyun and shakes hands with Kong-hoon. He says that he was unaware that Yoon Seo had a boyfriend, to which Kong-hoon responds that she prefers keeping it secret. Kong-hoon then embraces Yoon Seo in front of her friends. Following this, he leaves, and once inside the car, he imagines Yoon Seo dancing with Song-hyun, which makes him jealous. He tries to call her, but she doesn't answer, which annoys him. Just then, he is approached by a girl named Choi Ra-mi, who appears to like him. At first, Kong-hoon tries to ignore her, but ends up going to a cafe with her. While having coffee, he calls Yoon Seo and tells her to arrive at the texted location as soon as possible. At first, Yoon Seo says no because it's already late, but Kong-hoon reminds her of the contract, which states that the submissive must follow the dominant's instructions. As she prepares to leave, Song-hyun appears in front of her clinic and offers her a ride. On the other hand, Choi Ra-mi says that she's now eligible for marriage and wishes to marry him, but Kong-hoon says that he already has a girlfriend. However, Choi Mi-ra believes that he is lying in order to get rid of her. At the same time, Yoon Seo arrives and joins them at the table. Choi Ra-mi notices her and inquires about her age, to which Yoon Seo responds 30. Hearing this, Choi Ra-mi addresses her as an old lady, which enrages Yoon Seo. Soon, the two girls get into an argument, forcing Song-hyun to intervene. Seeing a new boy, the resilient Choi Ra-mi believes that Yoon Seo is a playgirl, but this time, Kong-hoon shuts her up. To prove their relationship, he proceeds to kiss Yoon Seo, but just then, Choi Ra-mi interrupts them. She then storms out, but not before warning everyone that she won't give up easily. As soon as she leaves, Kong-hoon confronts Yoon Seo for frequently seeing Song-hyun, to which she responds that he's a friend. However, he, as the dominant one, forbids her from seeing any guy. Following this, Kong-hoon drives her back, but Yoon Seo falls asleep in the car. He then pulls over and keeps staring at her. He tries to touch her hair, and in the process, accidentally wakes her up. Startled, she inquires as to what he is doing, to which he replies that she shouldn't sleep in front of others because she looks ugly while sleeping. Yoon Seo hiccups as he comes closer to her. The following day, a female customer comes to the clinic to have her dog examined. The lady shares that her dog hiccups when it sees a male dog, reminding Yoon Seo of the previous night. Later, Choi Ra-mi visits Yoon Seo's clinic to learn more about her relationship with Kong-hoon. Yoon Seo then calls Kong-hoon to inform him of Choi Ra-mi's arrival and to inquire about what she should do. Kong-hoon, who is in the middle of a meeting, tells her to do whatever she wants. Following this, Choi Ra-mi asks her if she intends to marry Kong-hoon, to which she responds that no one can predict the future and that she prefers to go with the flow. Hearing this, Choi Ra-mi becomes nasty and repeatedly refers to her as an old lady, infuriating Yoon Seo. As a result, they argue until Choi Ra-mi storms out. Yoon Seo is relieved that she was able to teach her a lesson. Later that night, Kong-hoon picks up Yoon Seo for their first movie date. While watching the movie, Yoon Seo, unlike Kong-hoon, reacts to every movie scene. After the movie, she takes a selfie with him and decides to paste it in her daily notebook. Soon after, Kong-hoon receives a business call, so he steps out of the car to answer it. Yoon Seo observes him from the car and finds him attractive when he smiles. The days pass and the two continue to go on dates after work every day. This causes them to be extremely exhausted. Seeing Yoon Seo's nosebleed, Jin Ki-young suggests she take a day off and rest. Yoon Seo follows her advice and texts Kong-hoon to ask for a day off. Later that night, the two friends are sitting at the clinic when one of the light bulbs starts to flicker. Yoon Seo considers calling the management office, but her friend informs her that it's closed. Jin Ki-young has an idea and tells Yoon Seo to call her boyfriend, but when the latter refuses, she sends a message to Kong-hoon from Yoon Seo's phone. A short while later, Kong-hoon arrives at the clinic and is disappointed to learn that she called him just to fix the bulb. Still, he climbs the ladder to fix the bulb, but he appears to be afraid to touch it. After watching for a while, Yoon Seo becomes impatient and decides to do it herself. She then climbs the ladder and quickly fixes the bulb, making her happy. However, as she prepares to descend, she slips and falls on him, causing them to accidentally kiss. At the same time, Jin Ki-young walks in, creating an embarrassing moment. Later, Kong-hoon walks out, but before leaving, he asks her if it was her first kiss, to which she lies and says no. She claims to have been kissed numerous times since kindergarten. That night, Yoon Seo keeps thinking about her first kiss and feels sad that it happened in such a bad way. She then texts Kong-hoon a goodnight message, which he ignores. This offends her, so she decides to ignore him as well. The next day, Kong-hoon visits the clinic and discovers that it's temporarily closed. He texts her asking where she is, but Yoon-seo ignores him. Kong-hoon then goes to the dance studio in search of her, but in vain. A few days pass, and Yoon-seo continues to ignore him. One day, Kong-hoon's secretary informs him of an invitation to a party. He also claims that if Kong-hoon takes Yoon-seo along to the party, he may be able to avoid all those blind date invitations. Following this, he texts a warning message to Yoon-seo, stating that if she continues to ignore him, he will consider it a breach of contract and will take legal action against her. This scares Yoon-seo, and she prepares to see him again. Later, Kong-hoon picks her up and drives her to a clothing store to get dressed for the party. As she walks out dressed, Kong-hoon can't take his gaze away from the lovely Yoon-seo. In the next scene, they arrive at the party and everyone finds them to be a lovely couple. Moon Yu-ra, who is also at the party, is shocked to see Yoon-seo there. She believes that such large parties are inappropriate for people like Yoon-seo. Hence, she approaches Yoon-seo to bully her, but instead gets bullied by Kong-hoon. Later, Kong-hoon becomes preoccupied with other people and Yoon-seo begins eating. Shortly after, Choi Rami approaches her and comments on her etiquette, starting a fight. At the same time, Kong-hoon arrives. Seeing him, she expresses regret for attending the party and tells him that she's glad that their relationship will end one day. Upset, Yoon-seo prepares to leave, but Kong-hoon pulls her back and kisses her, breaking Choi Rami's heart. Moreover, everyone at the party takes pictures of the two kissing. Following this, Kong-hoon drives her home, telling her to forget what happened earlier because it was a mistake. The next day, the video of the two kissing goes viral and Kong-hoon receives numerous phone calls from his mother. Later, his secretary approaches him to discuss how to handle the problem, to which Kong-hoon suggests they ensure that it doesn't affect Yoon-seo. He keeps looking at Yoon-seo's picture, appearing to be worried for her. On the other hand, Yoon-seo attends her dance class, covering her face. Upon reaching there, she finds Jin Ki-young watching the same video footage, but she's unaware that the girl in the video is Yoon-seo. While dancing, Yoon-seo sprains her foot, and Song-hyun attempts to massage it. Soon after, Kong-hoon arrives and asks Song-hyun to remove his hands from her. Song-hyun says that she needs a massage right now, but Kong-hoon tells him not to worry about his girlfriend. He then picks her up and drives her back to the clinic. On the way, he chastises her for her carelessness, to which she responds that it was an accident while dancing. Furthermore, she taunts him, claiming that she too can make mistakes like he did. Hearing this, he reveals that what he did at the party was not a mistake. As soon as they arrive, Kong-hoon applies bandages on her foot. During this time, she mentions how much she misses her first hospital in the countryside. After listening to her, he warns her not to go anywhere without his permission, indicating that he is possessive of her. He then puts her to bed and stares at her until she falls asleep. The next morning, Kong-hoon awakens to discover Yoon-seo has already left. He also finds a message from her telling him to finish the food on the table before leaving. Later at the office, Kong-hoon recalls Yoon-seo saying that she misses the rural area and worries that she will leave without telling him. As a result, he texts her frequently with the same question, "Where are you?" which irritates her. The next day, Kong-hoon calls her again to ask where she is, and Yoon-seo finally replies that she's at the broker's office, purchasing a separate flat for herself because she can no longer sleep on the couch. Later, Yoon-seo receives a call from the broker informing her that the owner of the flat has changed and the contract is invalid. Just then, Kong-hoon arrives and reveals that he is the new owner. This enrages her and she screams at him, asking why he keeps harassing her. He then tells her to move into his place, which enrages her even more. When he forces her to do so, she expresses regret over saving his life. Furthermore, she claims that she will live with someone only when she's in a loving relationship. Kong-hoon doesn't change his mind, and neither does Yoon-seo. It's revealed that Kong-hoon has even prepared a separate room for Yoon-seo in his house. The same night, Jin Ki-young and Song-hyun accompany a woman to Yoon-seo's clinic to have her dog examined. After examining it, Yoon-seo is saddened when she discovers that the dog is nearing the end of its life. Meanwhile, Yoon-seo receives a call from Kong-hoon, which Song-hyun answers. He cunningly informs Kong-hyun that his girlfriend is unavailable and hangs up the phone, infuriating him. After this, the three friends go out for drinks as Yoon-seo is upset that she was unable to treat the dog. She gets drunk out of sadness, and a few moments later, she receives a call from Kong-hoon. Jin-hyun answers the phone and gives him their location. After some time, Kong-hyun arrives, carries Yoon-seo on his back, and departs. On their way, Yoon-seo addresses Kong-hoon as Song-hyun, which enrages him. He tosses her to the ground and tells her to find her way home on her own. As he prepares to leave, another inebriated man approaches Yoon-seo and invites her to more drinks. When Kong-hoon notices this, he returns to her. He is about to pick her up when she vomits on him, as well as herself. Despite this, he manages to carry her back to the clinic, gets her changed, and puts her to sleep. Initially, Kong-hoon appears angry at her, but after staring at her for a while, he calms down. The next morning, Yoon-seo awakens to find Kong-hoon asleep. She finds him handsome, which makes her smile. Soon, she discovers that her clothes have been changed, and as a result, she screams, waking up Kong-hoon. Yoon-seo inquires as to who changed her clothes and how she arrived at the clinic. Kong-hoon, who is upset with her for the previous night, informs her of his decision to terminate the contract because she has breached it. He also instructs her to vacate the premise and prepare the fine amount. Yoon-seo, who doesn't remember anything, apologizes to him and begs for another chance. However, Kong-hoon reminds her how she got drunk with her male friend and mistreated him. Yoon-seo then recalls calling him Song-hyun and puking on him. She begs him for another chance, claiming she's willing to do anything. Kong-hoon takes advantage of the situation and tells her to move into his place. Later at work, Kong-hoon's secretary informs him of a message from his mother, who chastises Kong-hoon for the scandal and orders him to go on a blind date. Left with no choice, Kong-hoon obliges, and the girl is none other than Moon-yu-ra. He immediately tells her that he's in a relationship with Yoon-seo, to which Moon-yu-ra responds that once he begins dating her, he will forget about any girl in the world. This annoys Kong-hoon and he walks away, warning her to stay away from Yoon-seo. In the dance studio, Yoon-seo is dancing with Song-hyun when Kong-hoon arrives. He is envious that they are dancing together and interrupts them. Song-hyun claims that it's impolite, but Kong-hyun ignores him and begins dancing with Yoon-seo. While they are at it, Yoon-seo is reminded of all the good times she has had with Kong-hyun. After the practice, they both return to the clinic and talk for a while. Yoon-seo wonders what will happen if he doesn't want her to leave the house once they have started living together. Hearing this, he laughs and says nothing like that will happen. She again inquires what if she doesn't want to leave him. This question renders him speechless for a moment, but he responds that nothing has been decided yet. The next day, Yoon-seo packs her belongings and moves into Kong-hoon's place. When she arrives, she finds his house enormous and magnificent. Following this, Kong-hoon receives her, leads her to her room, and tells her to unpack and relax. Yoon-seo appears to be overjoyed with her new room. Out of excitement, she starts jumping and playing on the bed when Kong-hoon enters, resulting in an awkward moment. Later that night, a thunderstorm scares Yoon-seo and causes her to scream. Hearing this, Kong-hoon rushes to her room, and as soon as he enters, Yoon-seo hugs him tightly. Taken aback, he tells her to get off of him, creating another awkward situation. The following morning while having breakfast, Kong-hyun says that she has to do housework because she just can't stay there for free. Hearing this, Yoon-seo decides to divide their work and establish rules for them. She mentions the first rule, which is to avoid physical contact. She also shares the following rule: when she prepares food, he does the dishes. After this, they both leave for work, and on the way, Kong-hyun tells her to quit dancing because he doesn't like her dancing with other guys. Yoon-seo is sad, but she has no choice but to accept. He then drops her off at the clinic and drives away. As she walks towards the clinic, she notices Song-hyun waiting for her outside. Kong-hoon, who has driven a little further, sees them together in his car mirror and becomes enraged. Meanwhile, Yoon-seo invites Song-hyun inside and has a brief conversation with him. Song-hyun mentions that he's flying abroad for further studies and has come to say his final goodbyes. He also reveals that he liked Yoon-seo a lot in school. Before leaving, she thanks him for being a good friend. On the other hand, Kong-hoon arrives at the office and immediately calls Yoon-seo. He yells at her, demanding to know what her friend was doing there. However, he is relieved and overjoyed when she tells him that Song-hyun is going abroad. Yoon-seo then decides to prepare dinner and asks him about his return from work, to which he responds that he's unsure. Later, Yoon-seo returns home and decides to clean Kong-hoon's room, but she looks around first. She finds her shirt in his closet, causing her to recall their first meeting. Following this, she falls asleep in his bed. After some time, Kong-hoon returns home and discovers her sleeping in his room. He sits next to her and, as usual, stares at her. When he tries to touch her, she awakens and rushes away. Later, Yoon-seo receives a message from Jin Kyung telling her to click on a link. Upon doing so, she learns that the critical dog from earlier has died, but its owner is pleased with how Yoon-seo treated it. The owner gives her best reviews for Yoon-seo's clinic, which causes her clinic to gain popularity. The next day, a number of customers come to her clinic with their pets, keeping her very busy. Yoon-seo works late into the night, and Kong-hyun texts her to check on her whereabouts. She informs him that she is extremely busy and may not be able to return home. Kong-hyun understands her situation and tells her to take care, which makes her smile. The following morning, Kong-hyun misses Yoon-seo while eating breakfast. For a few days, Yoon-seo remains busy at her clinic, preventing her from returning home. One day, Kong-hyun becomes annoyed and asks the secretary if the city has only one clinic. The latter suggests he personally visit the place, to which he agrees. After work, Kong-hyun heads to the clinic and finds Yoon-seo asleep on the couch. He sits next to her and places her head on his shoulder. Soon after, her alarm wakes her up and she finds Kong-hoon. He expresses how nice it is to see her after several days, which makes her smile. Following this, the two of them kiss, and this time, he claims that it isn't a mistake. They then return home and sit in the garden for some fresh air. He tries to get closer, but Yoon-seo reminds him of the rule of no physical contact inside the house. He replies that they're currently outside the house and kisses her forehead. The next day, Kong-hoon's brother, Kong-jun, returns from America. Upon arriving home, he notices Yoon-seo, who appears to be nervous to see him. She inquires about his identity, to which he responds that he is Kong-hoon's younger brother. Meanwhile, Kong-hoon's secretary informs him of his brother's arrival. As soon as he hears this, he rushes home. Back at home, Yoon-seo and Kong-jun appear to have gotten along and begin cooking together. Kong-jun inquires about Yoon-seo's family history and is surprised to learn that they are orchidists. At the same time, Kong-hoon arrives and tells her to go to her room. As she is about to leave, Kong-jun grabs her hand and tells her to finish the cooking. As expected, Kong-hoon becomes angry and orders his brother to remove his hand from her. The same night, Kong-hoon tells his brother to stay in a hotel, but he refuses. Kong-jun then enters his room and looks at a photograph of himself and his brother with a girl in the middle. Meanwhile, Kong-hoon warns Yoon-seo not to look at Kong-jun because despite the fact that he is his brother, he is also a man. The next day, Kong-hoon and Yoon-seo leave for work, and Kong-jun sees them going. Later, Kong-hoon's secretary informs him that his brother has gone to Yoon-seo's clinic to have his minor wound treated. Shortly after, Kong-jun enters the clinic and asks Yoon-seo to treat him, to which she says that it's an animal hospital. Regardless, he requests that she treat him, and she eventually agrees. Following this, she gets back to her work and is about to inject a dog when Kong-jun intervenes. This agitates the pet, causing it to run amok and injure Yoon-seo's arm. At the same time, Kong-hoon arrives and confronts his brother. Because of the commotion, Yoon-seo orders both brothers to leave as they're disturbing the pets. In the next scene, Kong-hoon approaches Yoon-seo and advises her to take a few days off from work. He then gently tells her to take care of herself because he won't always be there for her. Kong-hoon seems to care about her, which makes her very happy. While they spend some quality time together, Kong-jun rings the doorbell. Kong-hoon then walks to the door and orders his brother to stay in a hotel. As a result, Kong-jun spends the entire night outside, suffering from cold. Seeing this, Yoon-seo brings him inside and allows him to have breakfast with them. Later, as both brothers are getting ready for work, Kong-jun approaches Yoon-seo and asks for help with his tie. Yoon-seo assists him, making her boyfriend jealous. As the brothers leave, Yoon-seo enters Kong-jun's room to clean it up and notices the same picture of the two brothers and a girl. Meanwhile, the two brothers are on a lift when Kong-jun keeps touching his Yoon-seo-made tie. Kong-hoon tells him to stay away from his girlfriend, to which Kong-jun responds by asking if he is afraid that Yoon-seo will choose him, as Kong-hoon's ex-girlfriend did. It is then revealed that Kong-jun had previously seduced Kong-hoon's ex-girlfriend, causing them to break up. Soon, the lift opens and both of them enter the office. Kong-hoon immediately gets to work, while Kong-jun simply passes the time. He is scrolling through social media when he finds out that Kong-hoon's ex-girlfriend is engaged. He also learns that Kong-hoon is happy with Yoon-seo. This hurts him, and he shows his jealousy in front of his brother. Kong-jun claims that both Kong-hoon and his ex-girlfriend are happy, but why is he the only one who is sad? However, Kong-hoon dismisses him and simply tells him to leave if he doesn't want to work. Later, Kong-hoon returns home, still thinking about his ex-girlfriend abandoning him. He then approaches Yoon-seo and tells her that she must remain with him no matter what. On the other hand, Kong-jun is in a bar and keeps looking at the post made by his ex-girlfriend. At the time of payment, he learns that all his credit cards have been declined. He then calls his brother for assistance, but Kong-hoon tells him to deal by himself. However, when the cunning Kong-jun threatens to put the bill in his name, he is forced to agree. Following this, Kong-hoon brings his brother home. Shortly after, Kong-jun tries to manipulate Sun-yeo into breaking up with Kong-hoon, but she gets angry and chastises him for his advice. The next day, Yoon-seo teaches the two brothers how to do laundry. After this, all three of them begin playing with water, creating a joyful moment. They are having fun when the brothers' mother arrives and interrupts them. She inquires about Yoon-seo's parents, to which she responds that they're orchidists. Hearing this, the woman claims that Yoon-seo's parents must be too busy to raise her properly. This offends Yoon-seo, who responds that she realizes she needs to learn more, but asks her not to blame her parents. The mother then asks her to leave because she needs to speak with her sons. Yoon-seo then walks away, followed by Kong-hoon. His mother attempts to stop him, but he ignores her. Kong-jun wonders why his mother mistreated Yoon-seo. He tells her that he considers Yoon-seo as his older sister and that he can act childish in front of her. In the meantime, they hear Yoon-seo's cat, and when his mother goes to check, she discovers Yoon-seo's room, which enrages her. Next, Kong-hyun and Yoon-seo head to the clinic. He apologizes on his mother's behalf and reassures her that it won't happen again. Yoon-seo remains silent and rests her head on his shoulder. As the two spend some time alone, Kong-hyun notices that Yoon-seo is feverish, so he remains with her and looks after her. In the midst of all of this, his mother calls him several times, but he ignores the calls. Yoon-seo advises him to pick up the phone and go home. She also asks him to bring her belongings, as well as her cat. Meanwhile, his mother cleans up Yoon-seo's room and finds their relationship contract in the process. A few moments later, Kong-hyun returns home and speaks with his mother. He reveals his love for Yoon-seo and expresses his desire to marry her. The narrow-minded mother objects to the marriage, but Kong-hyun has already decided. As a result, she suggests he at least test how much Yoon-seo likes him. She then hands him a prenuptial agreement and tells him to make her sign it. Kong-hyun is unsure how he will share it with Yoon-seo. The next day, he returns to Yoon-seo's clinic and finds another man feeding Yoon-seo. He is concerned because he doesn't know who the man is. Soon after, Yoon-seo introduces the man as her brother, Cha Yoon-seo, which relieves Kong-hyun. He then introduces himself as the CEO of DOL Group, surprising Yoon-seo. After a brief conversation, Kong-hyun decides to leave without mentioning the prenuptial agreement. Later, he stays late at work, brainstorming different ways on how to talk about the agreement. Meanwhile, Kong-hyun's mother pays a visit to Yoon-seo at her clinic. She tells her that Kong-hyun is thinking of marrying her. Furthermore, she asks if Yoon-seo is willing to pay the high price for being with Kong-hyun, to which she responds that she will do her best. She then forwards the prenuptial agreement, telling her to renew it every year or divorce him. Hearing this, Yoon-seo refuses to sign the agreement and also refuses to marry Kong-hyun. At the same time, Kong-hyun enters the clinic and overhears everything. After a while, the mother departs, leaving the two of them to talk. Kong-hyun asks why she won't marry him. In response, she bemoans the fact that she must sign an agreement that includes alimony after divorce and that she must leave her child behind. He begs her to do it his way one more time. Kong-hyun tries to persuade her that it's only for a year and that they will live as a normal married couple. However, Yoon-seo isn't ready for this and refuses to do so. He warns her that if he walks out of the clinic this time, everything will be over. When she remains silent, he walks away, waving goodbye. As a result, they are both heartbroken. That night, Yoon-seo packs her belongings and leaves. The next morning, Kong-hyun awakens to find a video message from Yoon-seo. In the video, Yoon-seo expresses her love for him and shares her decision to depart, leaving everything behind. Wasting no time, Kong-hyun goes to the animal store and brings Yoon-seo's pet cat home. He sobs as he wonders where she might have gone. In the next scene, we see Yoon-seo in her orchard, eating. A short while later, she receives a call from her brother, who demands payment for taking care of her clinic. While talking, Yoon-seo is interrupted by Kong-jun, so she hangs up the phone. After the two introduce themselves, Kong-hyun soon arrives and asks Yoon-seo for his sister's location, claiming he can't eat or sleep without her. On the other hand, Yoon-seo is at home, recalling all her good memories with Kong-hyun. She then checks her phone and finds a slew of messages from him, asking about her whereabouts and expressing how much he misses her. Unable to bear the pain, she eventually decides to return to him. Meanwhile, Kong-hyun finds out about Yoon-seo's location through her brother and heads there. Yoon-seo also calls his sister to inform her of Kong-hyun's arrival. As soon as she learns of this, she rushes back to her farm. Elsewhere, Kong-hyun's secretary informs his mother about how Yoon-seo saved Kong-hyun's life, causing the woman to regret her actions. Back at the farm, Yoon-seo runs into Kong-hyun, and the both of them are overjoyed to reunite. He then proposes a lifetime agreement to be together. Finally, the two marry, resulting in a happy ending.